The planets have aligned and the prophecy has come true. That's right, folks. It's time for the inaugural episode of the Roundtable Rethink podcast. With me, your host, Uncle Paddy, joined every week by spare parts bin and twin brother, Andy the Asshole.
Hello.
And of course, we couldn't do any of this without bestie, Stevie Tel Avivi.
Hello.
We're coming to you from the studio in Kilbarkin around about this time every week to discuss entrepreneurship, business, AI, tech, X, Elon, and markets, plus any goddamn thing we please. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
So the inspiration for this podcast is really just a formalization of what the three of us have been doing for about the last 7 years in quality breakfast establishments across Glasgow, where we get together on a Friday morning, we guzzle down poached eggs and sourdough, drink loads of coffee, and wax lyrical on all things markets, tech, business, and, you know, any damn thing that we please, as Paddy said. So this is really just a formalization of what we've been doing, taking it from the confines of breakfast establishments to the entire world via the witchcraft of the internet.
Looking forward to it, guys. It has been a fabulous journey to get to know you. I'm always amazed at the things we discuss, not just tech. And what terrifies me most is people hearing what we talk about and some of the things we're going to talk about, I'm sure, today and the weeks to come. So looking forward to getting the show started.
And Paddy, your prediction is by the spring?
We will be cancelled and floating through space with General Zod trapped in a mirror in the Phantom Zone.
And as this is our inaugural episode, I do expect we're going to get some stuff wrong, and I'm sure we're going to blow up the gaffometer and make Joe Biden look like Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah, but we're going to get better as the weeks go by. And we're absolutely committed to this for 12 months. So if we have 2 listeners, 12 listeners, 24 listeners, or 2,224 listeners, we're going to do it every week for 12 months. And at the end of 12 months, we'll look back and we'll say, okay, did it work? Did it land? Was it a fail? Do we continue or do we knock it on the head? So you're stuck with us every week for the next 12 months.
I say it's a bit like putting your house on the market. Everyone wants to come in on the first day, have a look around, see what your house looks like. And I suspect friends, family, whoever's listening today, please kick the tires, look at the car, but come back and see how it's maturing in the weeks, months to come. And Paddy's going to tell you where you can like, where you can click, and how you can subscribe to the show.
Yeah, so the podcast will be available wherever you get your podcast. So that could be Apple Podcast, it could be Spotify, it could be Pocket Cast. It'll be available on all the major podcast platforms under the Roundtable Rethink podcast. It will also be available at our own website, roundtablerethink.com, and can be streamed live directly from there.
Okay, boys, fail we may, but sail we must. So, Paddy, I'll hand it over to you to tell the good listeners what we're going to be talking about in our inaugural episode.
So we thought a great way to get kicked off here would be with a predictions episode. So as we go into 2025, there's a tremendous amount of change happening in the world. What do we think is going to happen over the next 12 months? So I think to guide the conversation here, we've got a whole bunch of questions and we've all got our predictions. We have not shared or compared notes ahead of time. So I don't know what Stephen's going to answer.
So. Yeah.
To any question, and I don't know what Andy's going to answer either. But we do have a bunch of questions. We're going to make our predictions for 2025, and then at the end of the year, we'll look back and we'll either take our victory lap or
realize what a bunch of monkeys we really are.
Morons we really are.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get started with our first question. So the first question is, which industries will see the greatest shift in workforce requirements due to AI in 2025? So I'm happy to take a run at this first.
Yep.
So my answer is going to be the whole customer service industry. So if you think about the rise of AI chatbots, agents, I think what you're going to see is the elimination of a lot of low-level customer service roles.
Mm-hmm.
I think, sadly, their roles are going to be able to be done very well by chatbots. And we already have examples today of that working extremely well. So the example I wanted to use as kind of receipts for this prediction would be Klarna. So everybody knows Klarna, right? The buy now, pay later guys. Certainly anybody who's got a Peloton bike knows who Klarna is. I've got one sitting in the corner over there. It's the
Unused.
world's most expensive clothes horse.
Fabulous ornament.
So Klarna's the buy now, pay later, guys. So a little bit of stats on Klarna. Klarna were able to replace 700 full-time agents with an AI chatbot, servicing 2.3 million conversations. So that's about 2/3 of all Klarna's service chats. Weirdly and crazily, the chatbot gets as good an NPS score as the agents, and in some cases it gets a better NPS
As
score,
the
so a
human
net
being,
net promoter score than the agent. And they're expecting it to add $40 million in additional profitability to Klarna's bottom line in 2024. So I think that's going to be a beacon to other big companies, and I think every big company in the world right now is trying to figure out how to eliminate the entry-level customer success jobs or customer service jobs and basically pivot that toward AI and AI workloads. Now, what is the workforce shift that's going to happen as a function of that? So I think, like you see, sadly, you're going to see a lot of the low-level jobs get eliminated. But what I think you're going to see is greater, higher value roles for things like, people that can train the AI, people that can interpret data and make decisions based on what that data is telling them. So I think that's going to be the main shift that you're going to see in customer service. So that's my big prediction for which industries will see the greatest shift in workforce requirements due to AI in 2025.
Good prediction. Quick question. So are these support requests kind of tier 1 and tier 2 support? They're not dealing with deep contextual support questions, are they?
Yeah, it's like I need a copy of my invoice, or when does my membership expire?
So it's entry-level support.
It's entry-level support, but that turns out to be the overwhelming majority of support as entry-level support.
And I think it mimics what's already happened with automation through time. Bank auto tellers came in, cash line machines replaced. I'll jump in next if I can, just on the basis that I want to get in before someone gets my answer. So I absolutely agree on what you've said. I think my main business interest is legal, and I was thinking, is this going to replace legal? The simple answer is no. It's going to take a while. Legal will be a slow adopter for two reasons. One, it's not in the industry's interest to get rid of the higher level, higher paying. So legal will push back against a lot of the higher powered stuff. Also, it's too small an industry to make impact. Absolutely, I think you're right. The next one for me, I think, is the kind of obvious one. Elon's talked about it forever, but this year is going to be self-driving cars.
God damn it, that was mine. But
I
it's
knew I
okay.
wanted to-
I'll have something a bit different to say. Carry on.
I knew that was going to be it, so that's why I wanted to jump in second. But I'm sure Andy will have a lot more information on this than I have. But we really are getting the stage where the neural networks are going to make self-driving cars safe. And what's really fascinating is the bigger picture, the political picture. Elon has put money into the American government. He's in with the BRICS. And as a result, regulation is going to come down quickly. And we'll talk about regulation, I'm sure, later on today. But regulation is a huge burden for technology. Regulation and law tends to be lagging indicators of what's going on. And in industries that move so quickly, it's really hard to be burdened by regulations that are not coming up to speed as quickly as the law is changing. And for the first time, I think we've got the stars aligning, and we're going to have fabulous AI, minimize regulation, and a real chance for self-driving cars to take off in the States.
But Stephen, just to take Paddy's kind of Klarna analogy there, are there not entry-level jobs in law like will creation and other things that really are step processes the AI actually lends itself very well to?
You're going to see definitely it coming, but it's not going to be coming quickly. I think I said to you guys earlier on today, chatting to law students today. I'm lucky enough to teach some law students. And I asked a group of 12, how many of you are currently using ChatGPT or any of the other large language models? And the simple answer is very few.
Right,
so
okay.
Law is often a lagging indicator. It's certainly a very, very disruptable industry, but it's going to push back against it. And my fear for law, we'll talk about this I'm sure another time, is it will be an external provider that's the most likely user of AI to burst the model.
Okay. Right, okay, well, good prediction. Well, so I've got, obviously, you stole my thunder a wee bit, but I've got self-driving as well. So the question was, which industries will see the greatest shift in workforce requirements due to AI in 2025? I've got traditional driving jobs, but in particular, ride-hailing. So what I want to do just now is just kind of paint you a wee bit of a picture of where the current autonomous ride-hailing, who the current autonomous ride-hailing companies are, the kind of traction that they've already got, and what the kind of growth rates look like going forward, and how that will disrupt jobs in the future in terms of the shift in work requirements. So the biggest player in the space is a company called Waymo. So operating only in Arizona and California, they've already in 2024 served 5 million autonomous rides. No driver behind the wheel whatsoever. Now, they have a really interesting business model in the way that they approach every city that they operate in. Months before they let any cars loose in a city, they actually work with the state and send in a very sophisticated sensor suite of LiDAR, radar, machine vision, and they basically map out to the last centimetre the full 3D vector space of the city limits in which they operate in before they drop in the cars. Now, the thing about that model is it means when they do drop in the cars, it's incredibly safe from the get-go. But it does make it harder and longer to scale that out to other cities, because there is all that prep work that needs to be done before you drop the cars in there. Now, just to give you a wee bit of an idea in terms of their traction, towards the end of 2024, they were up to 150,000 rides and 1 million autonomous miles driven per week. And they're just about to launch in Austin, Atlanta, and Los Angeles coming on stream. And so you can imagine that autonomous rides, just for that one company alone, the growth rates will be in the triple digits from them alone. Layer on top of that the fact that Tesla is literally weeks away from surpassing an experienced human driver with its FSD product, and are expected to launch their autonomous offering in California and Texas this year. And what that actually means is that you've got up to 700,000 Model 3s and Model Ys that by the mere updating of an over-the-air software overnight, you can basically sequester, theoretically, up to 700,000 cars into the autonomous fleet. And finally, you've got kind of challenger brands like Zoox from Amazon, you've got Waze, you've got Cruise. They all have their own autonomous offerings, but served exclusively through the Uber app. And so when you put all of that together, you can just see that this hockey stick of autonomous rides and the growth of that is going to be absolutely parabolic from this year onwards. Now, what does that actually mean for the shift in workforce requirements? Well, one of the really interesting things about the approach for most of these companies is that although the rides themselves are autonomous, they have these safety drivers that actually supervisors that operate out of these call centers. And their job is actually to be there and supervise the autonomous fleet and dial in remotely to troubleshoot any issues that the cars encounter. So I actually think you're going to see a huge collapse in demand for entry-level driving positions, but you're going to see an exponential increase for the demand for these kind of safety supervisor type drivers that can dial in from anywhere, either a call center or a terminal, to really monitor and supervise the autonomous fleet as it continues to grow.
I think it's going to be a very short time for public perception to change. I think a lot of people at the moment are worried about self-driving cars and accidents. And as we all know, the only thing that's important is, are the accidents less than the human percentage? And I think what's going to be really interesting is when people begin to realise they sit in a plane up in the sky with all the worries and fears often being flown by autonomous.
Yeah, so pretty much.
Once people start to get their head around self-driving is just another safe automated route, I think we're going to see this taking off exponentially.
Brilliant.
100%.
I think that's a great round of predictions, boys, there.
Yep. Okay, so we'll look back at the end of the year and see how good or bad we did on that. So the next one up is, what emerging technologies will have the biggest impact on daily life in 2025? Stephen, we'll let you go first on this one.
Again, it's easy to kind of talk about AI. I think AI is, I'm not going to focus on one of the things which is going to be interesting this year is we're going to be building out the capacity. AI is still not here. We're still at Web 1. We're not at Web 2.0 or beyond. and I don't want to go through all of my thoughts, but let's talk about synthetic biology. I think some of the things that are happening there are just incredible. What we've seen with Google, DeepMind, folding proteins, Ozempic, and of course, again, Novo Nordisk, Ozempic, the thinning drug.
Could be the sponsor for this podcast.
This podcast.
If anybody from Ozempic is listening,
What I've loved about
we'll definitely take some free product.
what I've been worried about so far in the discussion is there's been no interruptions so far.
Yes.
This is not like our breakfast.
Not like us.
But I think synthetic biology, we're seeing Novo Nordisk just released their latest version of Ozempic. Not as successful as they thought, but still another move forward. So it's not that it failed, but it's not quite as good as they anticipated. But that's in the nature of advancement. Again, I'm sorry to bring it back to the bigger picture, but this whole idea of what's happening in the world. We've got new government coming in America. This talk that perhaps they're going to address the obesity problem there and indeed here. Not looking around the table at anyone in particular. And I think we're going to see synthetic biology as being a real movement forward.
With GLP-1s at the centre of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, got it.
So I'll go next because mine's is related. So I put for the question, what emerging technologies will have the biggest impact on daily life in 2025? Health tech in general. So, and this is a wee bit personal, but I'll not share too much. So I think everybody can now relate to, particularly in the UK, of an example where the health service has now been there in the way that it used to when you got sick. And so
Amen.
You guys know I'm triaging a wee bit of a thing right now. Don't worry, I'm not going to die anybody.
Yeah.
But bloody uncomfortable. And
Stop being a drama queen. Your anal warts and your gout are not that big a deal.
and I cannot get any meaningful help from a GP or a doctor. I'm referred to a gastro. I'm reliably informed that's 6 months away. I'm in a lucky, fortunate position where I've got private health. So check this. I go to Circle Health last week. The first appointment they can get me with a gastro is April 9th, 4 months away. And so that's a lot of time to triage discomfort. So what am I doing as a result of that? I'm trying to self-solve this problem, right? So I'm looking at weight, lifestyle. I'm looking at probiotics. I'm looking at complete gut repair. I'm looking at doing a ton of personal testing. So I've got intolerance tests and allergy tests away to York Labs. I've got other tests away to a company called Gutology. I've probably spent somewhere between £500 and £700 on testing because I now know that unless I get to the bottom of this thing, I need to wait 5 or 6 months for the health service to show up. So I think this is all sort of rolling into a mega trend of health tech. And so if you think about the Apple Watch and all the things that's tracking right now, and not even the Apple Watch, just wearables in general, right? So they track your steps, your activity, your fitness, your blood oxygen. It's pretty clear now, I think, in this year coming that they're going to add blood pressure monitoring, heart rate monitoring. I think you're going to see a company like Apple or Google or one of the big Mag 5 companies that make wearables. They're going to start to connect the dots of all these things and start to provide proactive health insights to help people start to solve some of these health problems themselves without having to wait or rely on a health service that might or might not be there for you in a timely fashion. So for me, I'm going to say health tech in general, wearables, health tech, all that coming together is a mega trend that we see in 2025.
I always like taking things from the big picture down. And I think, again, it fits in perfectly with demographics. We are an aging population. So as we get older, health becomes our number one criteria for a quality of life. And that's what's going to drive that, as it's going to drive synthetic biologies generally.
I think you've said it at breakfast before, Stephen, like you have 99 problems, right? Until you have a health problem, and then you only have one problem.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter how much money you've got. It doesn't matter how good your life is outside of that. You just cannot be happy if you've got health problems.
Yep.
So
Never heard
health
it put better.
is wealth. Amen to that. Andy?
Okay, I am predicting that the emerging technologies will have the biggest impact on daily life in 2025. This will be the year that AI will actually become practically useful for ordinary people. What do I mean by that? I mean that most of the people that I know that use AI use it for a very narrow set of use cases. It's normally for copy, in image generation. It's for summarizing large documents. And it's for using as a bit of a research partner for things that you're working on. But the promise of AI and what people actually want to be able to do is pull their phone out and say, book me a table at an Italian restaurant in Glasgow tonight for 7:30 p.m. Or, find me cheap flights in March, return flights from Glasgow to Dubai. Okay, now go ahead and book it. And I think this agentic layer, these voice agents are going to really start coming to the fore this year and making AI practical and useful for ordinary people. And I've got a couple of receipts to kind of back up my prediction. So there are already a couple of companies, for example, Google Duplex, which is part of the Google Assistant suite, can call restaurants directly, make reservations for you already by mimicking human speech patterns to handle conversations naturally.
They can also tell you what have been the 3 most popular dishes from local restaurants and also the 3 that have been the least popular.
Yeah.
So it gives you that additional layer over and above it. So absolutely.
So these voice assistants are starting to become available. There's another good one that I found, which was called Eddie's Travel, and it's an AI-powered travel assistant that can book flights using voice commands for you. So I think this is the year that you're really going to see this agent layer appear on top of this super sophisticated AI and actually become useful and practical for ordinary people.
Very good. All right, we're 21 minutes in. We're going to try and squeeze in another few questions during this episode. Okay, so the biggest winners and losers in tech in 2025. We're looking for
it's businesses, biggest winners in business.
I've got it in tech.
Biggest winners and losers in tech 2025, company names and why. So we'll do the losers first. I'm happy to go with my prediction first, if you guys are okay with that. Okay,
Go for it,
I've seen
Patster.
a lot of people nodding. So I would say the biggest losers in tech in 2025 is going to be the legacy auto industry. So that's my prediction. So despite the fact that the demand for EVs is exploding, just in the last year, it's gone up 25%. They're shipping about 16 million units a year right now. The legacy automakers are imploding.
Yeah.
They're imploding financially. They cannot make a compelling electric car that anybody wants to buy. And so if you took the Volkswagen Group as an example, just this year, their stock's down 20%. In the last 5 years, it's down 50%. And they're one of the biggest car manufacturers, if not the biggest car manufacturer in the world. But then look at the product they're making. Can you tell the difference between a fucking ID4 and an ID5 and an ID6
Garbage,
and an
generic,
ID7?
vanilla, trash.
Garbage, generic, skateboard platform, different body shell on the top. Nobody cares. Whilst at the same time, you've got these unbelievable EV manufacturers in China, BYD, NIO, Zeekr, Xiaomi, names you've never heard of before, making the most unbelievable cars and actually selling them in volume.
By the million.
By the million in other parts of the world. I actually saw a video through the week where BYD now have a car that literally, and a wee bit of nostalgia here, everybody remember Knight Rider?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Remember Turbo Boost?
Yes.
Oh, aye.
BYD now have a car that literally does turbo boost.
Yeah.
It can jump a 16-foot hole in the road. It's amazing.
Which you need in Glasgow at the moment. There's
Yeah.
only a few 16-foot holes in roads.
So legacy automakers are really struggling, and they're doing what everybody does when they're struggling. The losers are starting to consolidate. So the losers are now at the loser convention, consolidating, trying to work out how to lose less together. And so it's a bit of a sad picture for legacy automakers. Examples of that would be Renault and Geely are looking to come together. I don't think they have come together, but they've expressed interest about joining forces. And more recently, you've got Stellantis and Honda, who are now looking to merge and become one company to figure out how to lose less. So for me, biggest losers, legacy auto industry.
I think that
Who
was
have you got, Stephen?
I'm not going to touch on my losers. I hadn't really thought through a loser. I'm going to touch on a winner. And again, driven by the bigger picture. What's happening in the world? We've got Donald coming into the presidency. He's promised peace in Ukraine and Russia. Whether he'll manage that or not, we'll wait and see. What's he going to do? He's going to come in, he's going to try and enforce peace, and he's going to try and enforce that European governments spend more on defence. And we probably all realise that defence doesn't look like it used to anymore. Having big battleships doesn't kind of work most of the time. So we need men on the ground, but we need drones. So who builds drones? So companies like Leonardo in Italy, Quantum Systems in Germany, our own BAE Systems, and Aerobus are all in the drone zone. And I think we're going to see not just a necessary spend, and in fact, we'll maybe talk about this later on, but we've grossly underinvested in our defence capabilities for decades now. And I think we're going to have to, us and most of Europe, are going to have to spend. Drones will be one of the major components, and therefore those that make drones, I think, will be a big winner.
Yeah.
Hopefully in a peaceful 2025. But I think peace only comes from having a strong military.
The drone wars.
Andrew being a big participant in that.
Well, don't steal my thunder, because my biggest tech loser of 2025 is the legacy defence contractors that make up the military industrial complex. So I'm talking about companies here like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman. These companies have been ripping off the Pentagon and the American taxpayer at scale for decades. I mean, there's been famous stories that have circulated throughout the years, you know, Boeing charging the Pentagon an 8,000% markup on soap dispensers that cost like 150 grand, 1,400 quid for an S-wing claw hammer. And a great example of Raytheon increasing the price of a Stinger missile sevenfold since 1991, to the point where the Pentagon were paying 400 grand for every replacement unit that they sent to Ukraine. So there's been a crazy level of grift going on forever here, but I predict that this is the year that the party is over for the big defence primes. Why? 3 reasons. Firstly, Elon and Vivek, as the head of the new Department of Government Efficiency, have been tasked with saving somewhere between $1 and $2 trillion. And they've already identified the Department of Defence as what they call a target-rich environment. So I anticipate that you're going to see a lot of long-dated contracts either cancelled or renegotiated massively to the downside. Secondly, you touched on it a wee bit there, the changing nature of warfare. Tanks. Let's look at an Abrams tank, a £12 million piece of machinery, slow-moving, lumbering iron coffin that are routinely destroyed daily now by £500 DJI drones with a grenade hanging off the end of them. So there's a new breed of these kind of lean AI-first, autonomous-first defence primes that are starting to emerge. Companies like Anduril. There's another company called Shield AI, with just better products that are more suited to the modern warfare and fantastically cheaper, because they've had to grow up in an environment of really lean business models and not this horrible bloated cost-plus business model that actually rewards these big defence primes for producing products as expensively and inefficiently as humanly possible. And finally, after a few horrible years of war, like you, Stephen, the new incoming administration in America have made it clear that they really want to start bringing these conflicts to an end, particularly in Ukraine and the Middle East. And so hopefully that will just create a lower demand overall together for these legacy weapon systems, and you'll see a big shift in spend for the old legacy stuff to the Anduril type AI autonomous first stuff. And that's my big prediction for biggest business
And
losers.
Of course, to mention that with Donald coming in, Ukraine is now going to be renamed America East.
Could be.
Yeah, he's taking it all.
Okay.
All right. So that sounded like a winner and a loser in that prediction. So I'll go with my biggest business winner for 2025. And for me, that is SpaceX.
Good one.
SpaceX is the most extraordinary, probably consequential business in the world right now, ran by an unbelievable female CEO called Gwen Shotwell.
Yeah.
Elon gets far too much credit. He's definitely the chief engineer. He's definitely ensconced in the tech behind SpaceX. But the lady actually running the business is a remarkable executive and has built a phenomenal company that have a technological lead that I don't think can be assailed. And so let me just paint a picture for you here about how big SpaceX's lead in launch capacity really is. So if you take US launches in 2024, SpaceX launched 145 launches
Wow.
in 2024. Okay. That was 95% of all launches that happened from US based launch companies. 95%. Everybody else combined was 5%.
Wow.
If you then put that into perspective globally, China, the continent, well, it's not the continent, the country of China, it should be a continent.
With
it's big enough.
1.5 billion people.
Yeah. Did 68 launches. They did less than half of the launches of this single private company. As a nation state, they did half the amount of launches. And of course, everybody except SpaceX is sending these rockets up, and then they're being destroyed on the way back in, and then they build a new rocket for the next launch. SpaceX are the only guys reusing these rockets. So they just have the most incredible technological advantage. When I was looking into this subject, the most terrifying fact, and it's just a damning indictment on our ability to not be able to get stuff done in this hemisphere or this part of the world. European launch in the same 2024, 3.
Yes.
SpaceX 145, China 68, Europe 3.
It's just
Is that
fucking
not the most
embarrassing.
damning, depressing indictment on our
depressing.
ability to get shit done?
I'm sure it's a discussion for future weeks, but what's gone wrong in this part of the West where we've no longer got, we've had such fabulous educational, entrepreneurial, and technical leads, and we've literally lost them all.
Yeah.
We've lost the ability to do cool stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't build anything because largely it's destroyed by regulators, and red tape have stopped any meaningful development project getting done now in this part of the world. But that'll be a subject for another podcast. There is one last thing I want to mention about SpaceX. We've only talked about the launch capacity. We've not even touched on Starlink, which is their space broadband constellation. Today, Starlink's a $6 billion business. They're forecasting it to be a $12 billion business in 12 months' time. It is a step change in what satellite internet can deliver. Everybody remember, I think everybody's had some exposure to satellite internet. It was
Garbage.
unbelievably slow,
Yeah.
unbelievably expensive, unbelievably unreliable.
Yeah.
And SpaceX fixed every single one of those problems. And now every rural community in the world is trying to get hooked up on Starlink. Every cruise ship in the world is trying to get hooked up on Starlink. Every airline in the world is signing up for Starlink. Every private jet in the world is installing Starlink. So
And I'm here for it. Get the bloody skates on and
there
get
is an
everything hooked up to
unbelievable
Starlink.
market for Starlink globally, and they've barely scratched the surface. SpaceX today valued at $350 billion as a private company. Can you imagine when that thing floats at some point down the line in the public markets? That Uncle Paddy's prediction, maybe not for 25, but looking at further, is SpaceX could become the biggest company
They've got so
in the entire
much
world,
room to
and
run.
a technological advantage that's completely unassailable.
I know in weeks to come we're going to make the difference between Elon's companies and Elon's public perception at times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that, again, we haven't even begun to touch on, so you've mentioned that with Tesla, we've got the whole robotics thing, and we're all very excited about what robotics is going to look like. So again, it's realizing the number of things that are Russian dolled within these companies, all of which are going to push us way ahead of where we are just now.
Okay, well, I'll just quickly rattle through my prediction as we are kind of getting down to the last 10 minutes of the show. So, potentially quite predictably, I've got NVIDIA here, but for good reason, right? Okay. Remember that every PC that you bought in the world had a wee sticker on it saying Intel inside? Well, NVIDIA are basically the Intel inside for all the hyperscalers. They're the high-performance compute that all the big hyperscalers use to train their AI and machine learning algorithms. So Microsoft, X, Google, Meta, Amazon, they all sit on top of NVIDIA compute. And they have two main products in their arsenal that make up the majority of their revenue. They have the H100 Hopper, now being superseded by the Blackwell chip. And what they're absolutely fabulous, like they're GPUs that are designed specifically for training these LLMs. So for example, Google's LLM is Gemini, X's LLM is Grok,
OpenAI
OpenAI for
ChatGPT.
Microsoft, ChatGPT, yep.
And of course, LLM, large language model for those
Large
listening.
language model, yeah. And because they're the gold standard for this kind of AI training, there's essentially no end to the demand at this point for their products. They're only limited by their ability to produce. And you're talking about a company here that's got godlike execution on every level of their business, from product innovation to production to sales. I mean, everything is firing in all cylinders. And to put that into a bit of perspective for you, they tripled their H100 production during 2024, and they're expected to produce between 1.5 to 2 million Blackwell units in 2025. Revenue was 130 billion in 2024, and that was up 154% for the previous year, with analysts expecting them to do 195 billion in 2025. So we've never seen a company so big and heavy with both revenue and market cap continuing to grow this violently. So it's for all those reasons and more that they are my biggest winner in tech.
Yeah. And to be fair, I think NVIDIA is an obvious one. And I think we were trying to pick non-NVIDIA options as well, because it's pretty clear for the next 2 or 3 years at least, they're only constrained by their ability to produce products.
I don't think people got a full understanding yet that what we're seeing with AI is like Web 1.0. That, in fact, we've got years of building out the rails. We're actually running along just now on a train, and we're building the rails for the train to run on at the same time.
Yeah.
So NVIDIA's runway stretches years ahead.
Yeah, because we're at the very beginning of this trend. Let's see if we can get through this one really fast, right? What will be the dominant LLM, large language model, in 2025? I'll go first. So for me, it's a close toss-up between Google Gemini and Grok. If you'd asked me that question 12 months ago, I would have said OpenAI. I always did say, in any speeches I gave about AI and any talks I delivered, I always did say it was too early to predict who the winners would be. Don't forget, Google are the OGs of this whole thing. They've been doing this for 15 years. They established their Google DeepMind division back in 2010. And the reason I think Google are good at this, A, they don't have as much reliance on NVIDIA as everybody else, because they actually develop their own TPUs, their tensor processing unit chips, which is what they use to train their AI models and run inference. So they're not as exposed to NVIDIA as everybody else. And then secondly, they've got access to real-time data. So for people listening, it might not be clear that a model like OpenAI's ChatGPT is only aware and cognizant of things that existed up until the point it was trained. So if ChatGPT-4 stopped getting trained in March of 23, it doesn't know anything that happened in 24 or 25 without going and conducting a web search.
I was going to say, is the latest model not get access to real-time?
Only through a web search.
Right.
Okay, so what it's doing, if you ask it about something that's current or in the future, it does a Bing search.
Right.
And then brings back the results and then reasons on top of the results. It's not actually being trained on that information. Whereas Google can feed real-time data into the model from its indexing of the web. And Grok has a similar advantage, right? Through X and the hundreds of millions of posts that happen every day on X, Grok can reason across that real-time data. So for me, I would say Google Gemini with Grok as a close second will be the dominant LLM by the end of 2025. Stephen, go.
So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give the exact same answer, but I'm going to tell you a slightly different reason. I think Google Gemini is a fabulous product. I think it comes down to who's got the most to lose, who's got the most to gain. Google has got so much to lose if it loses its ability to be the principal point of search. So Google's income now is as a search model, and it's now trying to understand where it sits in the market after that. So it needs to be good at this, and this is why it's going to push it. And it's got a unique set of sub-products, Google Documents, YouTube, all of the other things that it can use to, as you say, take information on it. So on one hand, you've got someone who's frightened of losing what they have. On the other one, you've got Grok, who needs to get good because it knows what it wants to get, which is that whole thing about neural nets, about self-driving cars, all of the other things that AI is coming. So one model's chasing the future, one model's protecting the back. I think it's a toss-up to see which one does it best, but they'll both be phenomenal.
Cool. I don't have an awful lot to add. I just kind of fell in favour of Grok, probably 55-45. The only wee bent that I wanted to add on the discussion was that Elon has hooked up, hardware. Training hardware is such a big component of this. And even though Elon was starting later than everybody else, he has just hooked up the biggest AI training cluster in history with 100,000 GPUs, all working in perfect harmony. Something that would have taken other hyperscalers a year plus to do. How many days was it?
45 days,
45
60 days,
days.
something like that.
Yeah. So you just know with that maniacal level of execution, plus the data advantage that Grok have with that closed garden with billions of tweets getting published every day and all the contextual information you can get for that and the synthetic data that you can build off it, I just think that they're going to edge out the race in favour of Grok.
Okay, let's move on from that. Will we make this our last one, or do you want to keep rolling? I'm
do
good
two
either
more.
way. Right, we'll do two more. So we've left some of the spicy stuff, the potentially
Get cancelled on
get
episode
cancelled
1.
stuff till the end. So biggest political winners in 2025. Andy, you go first on this.
Again, I've went with Elon, right? Okay, so I was tempted to go with something more broad like the right wing, but I've essentially just doubled in on Elon, and I'll tell you why. So you have to put this into a bit of context. This was a guy that was, generally speaking, hated by the Biden administration and potentially Democrats for a number of reasons. A couple of the obvious ones are Biden hated him because he didn't hire any union workers. It was all non-unionized labor that he used for all his companies, to the fact that he wasn't even mentioned in the EV summit by the president of the United
that was an
States.
absurdity, yeah.
It's absolutely absurd. And he was very critical of the Biden administration and a lot of their policies. So imagine the risk that he's taken here. He went full bore in behind Trump, right? So holding town halls in person and online every day. He raised a PAC with $200 million in it, was absolutely scathing of the current Democratic administration and what was potentially coming in. And if this bet had backfired and Kamala had got in and built out her own administration, he would have been public enemy number one and could have had multiple of his companies taken to zero. And I think there would have been severe retribution if the Dems had got in against Elon.
Yeah, no doubt.
So he bet the farm on Trump. The bet paid off. Since then, he's now Trump's right arm. He's at Mar-a-Lago every other day. He seems to be involved in every single decision that Trump makes. And his 200 million quid that he raised for Trump has actually equated in a jump in his personal wealth since the election of $150 billion in personal wealth appreciation. Not to mention the $800 billion it's done for his companies. So I think he's hands down the biggest political winner of 2025.
Spicy take. Stephen, over to you.
I'm going to say potential biggest winner. And I have to, as a lawyer, give my
Just
your safe
caveats,
harbor statement.
is I wouldn't vote for him. I don't necessarily like him. Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he goes in with a mandate. He goes in with some incredibly bright people, but I think he goes in with a couple of potential weaknesses. He's got a very inflationary stance at the moment, and really he's betting a lot on the ability of the American, the change to bureaucracy to cut spending. So really, Elon's job to bring down the government spending is going to be so important, and that's going to also depend on getting those cuts through Congress.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see a big moment about March, April, if I remember, when the first budget goes through. If they don't start to show to the markets that they can get spending down, then they're really starting to lock in inflation. And we can maybe talk a bit about Britain.
Yeah,
when we
we'll be
come
in the
to
same
losers.
position as us in a minute.
Yeah, that basically Trump could be a massive winner here. I think he's also maybe lucky. I'd rather be lucky than good. He's going to come into office with the Israel-Palestine problem pretty much punched out. So I think Netanyahu's probably just waiting to give him a win. And I think also Ukraine-Russia largely punched out both sides.
And he'll take credit for ending both of them.
Yeah. So again, real opportunities. So I think Trump. And if I was going to give a more general one, I think unfortunately we're going to see just far right all across the world just now. Just far right policies are spreading. But
I agree.
Donald Trump's my kind of main
Good
one.
take. Bro, biggest, we're going to finish on this one.
Oh, hang on.
Oh, no, have you not given you've not given your prediction
No.
yet.
So
Jump the gun.
My biggest political winner, there's two things here. So there's an idea which is fiscal conservatives. So national debts of Western countries are completely and utterly out of control and are the asteroid strike that's going to wipe us out eventually. And I think you saw with guys like Javier Milei in Argentina that you can actually get on top of these deficits. It takes hard decisions. It takes big cuts. It requires a lot of deleting of government departments, but eventually you can get to a surplus. And he has actually got, I think it was in Q4 last year, he's got to the first budget surplus in any quarter in Argentina's history in the last 18 years. So that he's kind of shown it can be done. And I think what Elon and Vivek are doing with Doge, there's a lot of inspiration coming from what Malay's done in Argentina.
Yeah.
And so I would say that that's the biggest winners. It's fiscal conservatives. If you wanted to put a person, so that was an idea, the biggest person that I would say was the biggest political winner. Trump's the obvious one, right? But I wanted to go with something that was non-obvious. So I went with J.D. Vance. Mm-hmm. So Trump is 78, loves McDonald's, seems to live on pretty
Coca-Cola.
much... and Coca-Cola, right? So he seems to live pretty much on a diet of processed foods.
Heart attack diet, stroke diet.
Yeah, and so Father Time is undefeated. At his age, at his body mass index, with all the things that's working against him, there's at least a chance. And to be clear, I don't wish this for him, but there's at least a chance that at some point during his
first term. Yeah.
Well, it's not his first term; it's the only term he can do now. So at some point during
Let's wait and see.
at some point during his term, Father Time will kick in and do what Father Time does. That would make J.D. Vance the youngest president in history. He's already the second youngest vice president in history. So we'd have somebody in their early 40s in the presidential seat, in the Oval Office, who's smart, who's accomplished, who's young. He's 40 years old.
40.
At the moment. So you'd have the youngest president in history. So there's at least a chance that J.D. Vance could become the youngest president in history. So I picked him as a wild card for my biggest political winner.
That's a really good take. So what we're going to finish on?
Well, Milei was on my list as a second one. Can I do my biggest political loser?
Yes, go ahead.
Finish on that. Yeah.
So basically, and I'll be honest here, this would not necessarily have been the party I would have voted for, but I actually voted for them at the last British election. So I'm going to say Reeves, our Chancellor, is my biggest political loser of the year.
Yeah.
And I think really just on the basis of the state of the country's finances. We've seen it since the last budget, that probably we're now sitting in a worse position than we were after the disastrous budget from
Liz Truss.
Liz Truss, thank you.
Yeah.
And you, for those listening, there will come times over the next few weeks when these guys will have to fill my words in for me. I always forget names. So we're sitting here with a budget surplus. And again, I ran off just some figures from my own interest earlier on. Over the last 25 years, we've taken total government spending from 390 billion to, I think in 23, something like 1.3 billion.
Trillion,
1.3 trillion. And had we only taken that up by an inflationary amount, let's say 3% a year, we'd be sitting about 795 billion. So there's like 400 billion of unaccounted for additional expenditure. And if I could see that there was something within the UK economy that really made me excited, then I would say, well, money well spent. But I don't think any of us are seeing that.
Can I just ask a question before you go any further on that, Stephen? I'd be interested to know, do you have the stats here, the difference between 2019 and 2023 or 4? Because obviously COVID, the spending and then the subsequent debt that we accrued because of COVID must play some kind of part in that increase, no?
Well, we went up 2019 government spending 883 billion to 2023 1.33
so we've
billion.
added 370, 400 billion.
Debt interest in the same period went up from 48 billion to 57 billion.
Okay, so it was
So
only...
debt interest is not what's driving the problems. And in fact, again, the figures are kind of showing what is driving the problems. Well, it's not defence spending, it's hardly up. And it's not education, it's not substantially up. It's
The welfare state.
the welfare state.
Yeah.
And again, not saying that we shouldn't have a welfare state, absolutely, but it's gone up from, I think, 120 to 330 billion in the same period, an increase of, and I think the inflation adjusted would be something like 1.35. So we're way over.
I'd love to see what the line items inside that kind of umbrella, social security spending is. Wonder what the big line items is that's really bumped that up. Anyway, it's probably for another show, but that's your biggest political loser. That's good, bro. What are you going with?
So, biggest political loser, again, an idea in an individual. The woke left.
Yep.
Woke left ideology. It's pretty clear now that there's a wholesale rejection of woke left ideology. It's the rise of MAGA and Trump. It's Trudeau out in Canada and Poilievre, probably the next guy in. It's closer to home. It's the rise of Reform and Nigel Farage, and that whole phenomenon now got 20,000 more paid up members than the Conservative Party. And then you see what's happening in Germany and France and Hungary and other countries across Europe. So I think you're now seeing this wholesale rejection of woke left ideology. I'm not opining on whether the reaction to that and right-wing parties are a good thing or a bad thing. It's just an observation. Individually, it's hard to go past Keir Starmer. Never seen a guy come in with such a mandate and then become so unpopular so quickly. Everybody knows how I feel about Keir Starmer.
but here's the thing.
Not good, and he's just the most... I'll tell you what, Rick, nothing activated me more to get involved and do a podcast and start, instead of whining about stuff, start doing things, than Keir Starmer's interview with Beth Rigby about the working man. His portrayal of the working man. Yeah. It was the most depressing thing I've ever fucking seen. And I remember thinking, I pray to God that Paige and Sam are not watching this, my kids, because for young kids, it was like, the working man has no assets. He painted this gloomy picture of the working man gets up at 2 a.m. and walks to work and then bends metal in a factory all day and then comes home and eats porridge round a fucking candle.
Crawls out of a coal mine with his face covered in soot after
and he
12
has
hours.
no assets, and it was just, oh my God. So this guy has no ideas how to grow the country. He's got no idea. He's never created a positive vision for what the UK could be, and he's done that. For me, the biggest crime is he's not created any positive vision for young people, for what the future can be, living and working in this country. And so for that, I have no forgiveness for him.
I've only just got a wee bit to add to that because I totally agree. I mean, we all feel, we're all so affected by what's happening in the UK just now that we all have very strong feelings in that subject, and that's why Starmer and the Labour Party were always going to come up in the biggest political losers. But just to build on that, I mean, I think one of the things that really sticks in your throat is they come in with this thumping majority, with this fully costed manifesto, and then on day one lie through their teeth on national TV that they've just discovered this £22 billion black coal. If I hear that phrase one more time, I'll jump into a black hole. But and then immediately their first act was to take 11 billion of that and weigh in all the union workers, because their union paymasters helped them into power. So everybody got weighed in with inflation busting pay rises. The train drivers get an extra 10 grand, from 50 to 60 or whatever. And so, but simultaneously racking up taxes on businesses to historic levels with that, the NI increase and the minimum wage increase.
So let's go off piste for the moment, because I think this isn't scripted, but let's chat, because I don't think we're here to give Labour or anyone a bashing.
I am.
My experience has always been that actually when I have political discussions, whether you're Labour, Tory, Reform, we all want the same thing. We all want a fabulous country with everyone's doing their best. So do we think the Tories would be any better? Probably. My attitude, no. We had 10, 11 years of really bad management. So are we crying out for a political change, or is there some other option? Are we looking at a reform government in 4 years' time, or is there some other move that's going to happen in that period?
There's a political reawakening happening across the Western world. Paddy touched on it a wee minute ago. In pretty much most Western countries, the populace is overcorrecting to the right. So you've got Meloni in Italy, you've got the AfD in Germany, you've got Trump in America, and it's actually the failure of the incumbent parties, whether they're centre, centre-left, centre-right. They've been an abject failure. We've only had the Tories and Labour in the UK from time immemorial. And look at the legacy that they've left us here in 2024, a country drowning in debt, every school and hospital in the country crumbling, sitting on Victorian infrastructure that was built 100 years ago, haven't built a new reservoir in the country since the 1970s. They've completely squandered their wealth, and now we're sitting here drowning in debt and getting worse and worse every year. And so that's why I think it's left this political gap for new parties and new ideas to emerge.
We've got to ask ourselves, why can we not get anything done in this part of the world anymore? And so I don't find myself leaning left or right. I get infuriated by the fact, why can we not get anything done? Who's the UK's big AI company? You can't name them, and neither can anybody else, because they don't exist, right? So we've got this new wave that we all accept is going to disrupt the entire world, and there's almost going to be nothing untouched by it. And where's the UK's part in that whole thing? We don't exist. Like, we are now building the next great frontier model. We are now racking the next, 100,000 watt GPU cluster to train Europe's version of ChatGPT. We're not doing any of these things.
And we've got no imagination. Can you imagine you come out and said, our big policy is we're going to recreate the Burj Khalifa in Glasgow? You would just get assailed instantly. We're going, oh, pensioners can't turn their heating on in the winter and you want to build the Burj Khalifa. We have no imagination
or
whatsoever.
ambition.
Or ambition.
There's a balance. So I think what's interesting is, I think what we're hopefully all saying is there's an opportunity for parties to reimagine themselves. But if they don't reimagine themselves, we really have some kind of major shuffling. And I fear for the move to the right in Europe just now. I think
that it overcorrects too far to the right.
100%. And I'm not opining that is the right way to go. I just wish we could get stuff done.
Likewise, if we were sitting here a year ago and I said the Tories are the big losers, it's going to be really interesting. I would disagree. I think, unfortunately, Keir Starmer's got such a majority that he's not going to shift. I think it's more likely to get Reeves out than it is Starmer out. But it's going to be, and that's going to be a factor of markets. But
okay, boys,
it's going to be interesting looking back.
We've kind of went off piece there. This is a prediction show. We've got through a whole bunch of stuff there. I think that's enough for episode 1.
Absolutely.
How do you want to see us out of this one, bro?
No, I think we're done. So there you go, folks. First episode in the can of the Roundtable Rethink podcast.
I thought it went well.
Yeah.
I thought it went well.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
I feel good.
I knew that I would now.
I'm not going to sing now.
So yes, we'll be dropping this episode at the same time again next week, or we'll be dropping a new episode at the same time next week. So don't forget to pick us up wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts, or go to our website direct at theroundtablerethink.com. Thanks, everybody. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, guys.